In this part 2 of the discussion on uncertainty relationships, let us consider some applications. So first I will discuss applications of energy time uncertainty relationship. Um, let us consider this problem. Finite width of excited energy states and spectral lines. Okay. Finite width of excited energy states and spectral lines. I have mentioned about this during the discussion on energy time uncertainty relationship. Now let us do some calculation. So I will look at this problem in 3 steps, or let us consider 3 different types, 3 different versions of this problem. So first is let us consider atomic energy states. Atomic energy states. Okay, as we have seen in the case of, for example, Bohr atom model. So consider the different energy states available for an atom. So the ground state is left to itself, the system will remain in the ground state. Or let us consider the electron in the atom. Consider, for example, hydrogen atom, the simplest case. So left to itself, the electron is in the ground state, so it can remain in the ground state for infinite time. So there, as we discussed earlier, the lifetime of the ground state tends to be infinitely large. Okay. So according to energy time uncertainty relationship, if tau is infinitely large, then the energy, the uncertainty in energy goes to 0. Okay, because the product is of the order of a constant, of the order of Planck's constant. So delta E tends to 0 means energy of the ground state can be exactly determined. But what about the excited states? In the case of atomic energy states, atomic excited energy states, the lifetime is of the order of 10 raised to minus 8 seconds. Okay. Then let us calculate what will be the width of these energy states. So the idea is, as I mentioned, if this is E1 is the ground state and E2 is some excited state, since electron remains in the excited state only for a finite time interval 10 raised to minus 8 seconds, when we try to measure the energy of this excited state, there will always be some error. Okay, so this can be considered as, or we can represent this as some finite width of this energy state. Okay, pictorially we can say that we cannot draw a sharp line for this energy level. We can only show a line with a finite width, and this width is nothing but our uncertainty in energy. Okay, error in the energy measurement. So how do we calculate this? Delta E, we know the energy time uncertainty relationship, greater than or equal to h cross by 2. So delta E must be greater than or equal to h cross by 2 tau. Okay, we can substitute 10 raised to minus 8, we know the value of h cross, and you will get the answer in joule. Okay, let us, we know that in the case of atomic and subatomic systems, the energy is usually expressed in electron volt or in its multiples, kilo electron volt or mega electron volt. So let us convert this, substitute the value of h cross, substitute the value of tau, and then express the answer in terms of electron volt. You can check this value. The value will be, what you get is 3.3 into 10 raised to minus 8 electron volt. Now this 3.3 is not important, because using uncertainty relationship we always get only the order, approximate estimate of a quantity. So the important point is 10 raised to minus 8 electron volt. Okay, so the width of the atomic energy states is of the order of 10 raised to minus 8 electron volt. And it can be easily remembered. The lifetime of atomic excited state is also 10 raised to minus 8 electron volt, and the width is also 10 raised to minus 8 electron volt. Now, a consequence of this width is that if you consider the electron goes to the excited state, and if it de-excites back to the ground state, then a photon of energy is emitted. Okay, and according to Bohr formula, we know that the energy of this photon is equal to the difference in between the two energy levels. Okay. Now, if E1 is having a fixed value, but E2 has an error in this. It means that if E2 has an error, then this difference in energy has an error. Then that means that the energy of this photon will be not exact, or we cannot exactly determine the energy of this photon. There will be an error in this energy. Since H is a constant, the error in the energy of the photon will be manifested as the error in the frequency. So if we take differentials on both sides, we get H delta nu is equal to, this is a constant, E1 is a ground state and it's a constant. Okay, but E2 has a variation of delta E, so what you get is delta E. But delta E is the error in the expression of, in the value of E2, in the value of the excited energy state. So what is this delta nu? Delta nu is delta E by H. Okay, so let us calculate this value. So delta nu is equal to delta E by H. This is the finite width of the spectral line, in the frequency of the spectral line. Now, since delta E is, let me go back to this formula, because we can cancel H. So we can say delta nu is greater than or equal to, since delta E is greater than or equal to this value, delta nu is greater than or equal to, I am substituting this value. So H cross by 2 tau, that is delta E, and then there is an H in the denominator. Okay, so H will cancel. So what you get is delta nu is greater than or equal to, H cross is H by 2 pi, so one H will cancel, so what you get is 1 by 4 pi tau. Okay, so the value is, if we substitute these values, what you get is 8 into 10 raised to 6 hertz. Okay, for transitions in atomic energy levels, usually in the case of transitions in atomic energy levels, if it is valence states, outermost energy states of an atom, then what you get is visible light, visible wavelength, or UV, okay, infrared also. So these spectral lines, the frequency of these spectral lines will be having a finite width of this much, 8 into 10 raised to 6 hertz. Okay, we can also express this width in terms of wavelength also. Let us do that. Consider a visible light, a visible spectral line, let us say green line. Okay, so lambda is, for green line it is nearly 500 nanometer. So let us calculate what will be the, if this much is the width in frequency of a spectral line, what is the corresponding width in the wavelength. Okay, so for that we need to find the value of the wavelength. So let's choose a green line. What is the width? Okay, so the relationship between the two is nu is equal to c by lambda. So as in the previous class, we know that if there is such an inverse relation, we cannot say that delta nu is equal to c by delta lambda. That's not correct. We have seen that in the case of wave number and lambda. So we have to take differentials on both sides. So what is delta nu? It is minus c by lambda square delta lambda. Minus sign only indicates that as wavelength increases, frequency decreases. So we can take the magnitude only. So magnitude of delta nu is c by lambda square magnitude of delta lambda, right? So let us go back to this formula, and then we can get an expression for the magnitude of delta lambda. Okay, so we can write delta lambda. I am dropping the magnitude symbol. Delta lambda is equal to, from this expression, lambda square by c into delta nu. But delta nu is greater than or equal to 4 pi tau. So we can say delta lambda is greater than or equal to lambda square by c into 1 by 4 pi tau. Delta nu is greater than or equal to 1 by 4 pi tau. We can substitute that value. So we have all the parameters. Tau is 10 raised to minus 8 second. Lambda is the green line, 500 nanometer. If you substitute these values for the green line, we can get a value 6.67 into 10 raised to minus 15 meter. It's very small, okay. That means the width in the spectral line is very small compared to the wavelength of the green line. We can find the relative, the fractional change in this fractional width, or how much is this width corresponding to the wavelength. We can find that. So if I substitute these values, 6.67 into 10 raised to minus 15, lambda is 500 nanometer, which is 500 into 10 raised to minus 9, and this value is 1.33 into 10 raised to minus 8. Again, when you do calculations using uncertainty relationship, let's don't worry about these numerical factors. Okay, after all, this is an inequality. So let us look at only the the order of the value. It is 10 raised to minus 15 meters. So if we take the fractional change, we get 10 raised to minus 8. So 10 raised to minus 8 is a very small fractional change. So the point is that the finite width of the spectral line. Okay, so the discussion shows that since all the excited energy states have some error, okay, or some finite width, there will be a corresponding finite width in the frequency or wavelength of the spectral lines. Okay, and in the case of transitions in atomic levels, most often in the case of valence states, these transitions will lead to the emission of visible photons. These visible spectral lines will have some finite width. So if we look at a spectral line that we see in the lab using a high resolution spectrometer, we can always detect this finite width. It's not exactly sharp, but the point is that this finite width, the fractional value of this width is 10 raised to minus 8 for visible light. It's very small. Okay. If you consider spectral lines, there are basically three reasons for finite width of spectral lines. One is collision broadening. Okay, this finite width we can also call broadening of spectral lines. One is collision broadening due to the random collisions between atoms at any temperature. And second is Doppler shift broadening. These atoms will be in continuous motion. So during the emission of a spectral line, whether the atom is moving towards us or away from us, depending on that motion, the spectral line, the frequency or wavelength of the spectral line will be varying. There will be slight variation. So that's called Doppler shift broadening. And the third reason is that broadening due to uncertainty relation. So in these three cases, in these three factors that affect the broadening of a spectral line, collision broadening, Doppler shift broadening, and broadening due to uncertainty relationship, the least factor is the broadening due to uncertainty relationship. The other two factors are greater than that. Okay, so it's a very small factor. Okay, so this is about the finite width of excited energy states and spectral lines in the case of atomic energy states and the corresponding transitions. Now let us move on to nuclear energy states. Okay. We can repeat this calculation in the case of nuclear energy states. Okay. So let us consider in the second type of this problem. Let us consider nuclear energy states, and here I will consider a particular problem called the mean life a compound nucleus. Okay. This situation is something like this. Consider a nuclear reaction of this type. An incident particle, let us say small a, comes and collides with a target nucleus. Okay, so this is some incident particle. Let us say some, it's called a projectile, a proton or neutron or alpha particle or anything. This is a target nucleus. It remains usually in a particular experimental setup. Target nucleus is stationary. It's not a single nucleus. You will have a target block, and you have a beam of incident particles. So we are simplifying that. We are considering only one incident particle and one target nucleus. Okay, actually the experimental setup is a beam of particles are there and a block of target is there. So target nucleus is stationary and you have a incident particle coming and colliding with the target nucleus. And in a typical nuclear reaction, if depending upon the energy of the incident particle, sometimes these incident particles will be absorbed by the target nucleus. Okay, and we get an intermediate state like this. Okay, incident particle absorbed by the target nucleus, we get an intermediate state, and then after a very small interval of time, it decays to some daughter nucleus and some other particle. Okay, so this is a typical nuclear reaction. Okay, so a projectile incident particle collides with the target nucleus, it is absorbed, you get an intermediate state, and then a daughter nucleus and another particle. In this case, nuclear transmutation can happen. One type of nucleus can be transmuted to another type of nucleus. It's called artificial transmutation of nuclei. Okay, so what we are interested in is this intermediate state. This is called a compound nucleus. We want to calculate the lifetime of this compound nucleus. So how do we understand that a compound nucleus is formed? If we draw a graph like this between the reaction cross section, now this cross section means, let us simply understand this as the probability for this reaction to take place, the probability for this incident particle to be absorbed by the target nucleus to form this intermediate state and then decay. This probability of this reaction, of this nuclear reaction, is measured in terms of a quantity called reaction cross section. Okay, let's don't worry about that now. And x-axis we are plotting energy of the incident particle. Energy of incident particle. Okay, this type of graph is typically drawn in the case of nuclear reactions. So the reaction probability is plotted against energy of the incident particle. So this graph can be of different shape depending upon what is the nature of the incident particle. Okay, so I draw a typical graph like here. It's not always, it's not a generic graph. That means it is not always the shape of the graph in nuclear reactions. If this is a neutron, okay, let us consider a neutron absorbed by a cadmium nucleus. Okay, cadmium is a good absorber of neutron. Then you get some product. Okay, some intermediate compound nucleus and then some product. So if it is a neutron, it can happen that as the energy if it's a slow neutron, the probability of absorption is high. Okay, so if the energy of the incident particle, incident neutron is small, and the reaction probability or cross section can be high. As the energy increases, what happens is the neutron can simply pass through the target block without getting absorbed. So the probability of reaction will decrease if it is a neutron. But if it is a proton, then the situation can be different. Okay, graph can be different. But let us consider it's a neutron, so that let's consider this particle is such that as the energy of the incident particle increases, probability of cross section decreases. So a typical graph can be something like this. Goes like this. Okay. So reaction cross section versus energy of the incident particle graph. One example of this graph is like this. So we are not interested in the overall shape of this graph. What we are interested in this is this peak. Okay, what is the meaning of this peak? What is the idea? What is the importance of this peak? Without the peak, if you look at this graph, as energy of the incident particle, in our example it's a neutron, as it increases, probability of reaction decreases, reaction cross-section continuously decreases. But here, when the energy of the incident particle reaches some particular value, there is a sharp increase in the reaction cross-section. Okay, a sharp increase in reaction probability. It means there is a sharp increase in the probability for this incident particle to get absorbed, and this compound nucleus is to be formed. Okay, this type of a peak has a name. It's called resonance. A resonance peak. From the analogy with electrical circuits. Okay, so this peak indicates a resonance. What is the significance of this resonance peak? It shows that there is a high probability for this reaction to take place. In other words, it shows that there is a high probability for the compound nucleus to take place. Okay, so this resonance peak is a signature of the formation of compound nucleus. Okay, now from this resonance peak we can calculate the mean life of the compound nucleus. Let us see how. What we do is we take the width at half maximum of this peak. Okay, let us take the half maximum of this peak and find this energy width. Okay, so this width, let us call it delta E. Okay, this width, another symbol that we use for this width is gamma. Okay, let's don't worry about the symbol. This is Greek capital letter gamma. Let's don't worry about the symbol. The point is that this is the width at half maximum. Okay, so this is some energy value. So this energy gives you the width of the energy for which this reaction happens. Okay, so then the question is, what is the time interval for which this reaction can happen? This absorption, this reaction, the probability of this reaction can remain high for this much width of energy. Then what is the time interval for which this probability of reaction can remain high? In other words, what is the time interval for which this compound nucleus can remain formed? Or the corresponding time interval gives you the mean life of the compound nucleus. So we can connect this width of the energy at half maximum with the mean time interval or mean lifetime of the compound nucleus through uncertainty relation. Okay, our familiar uncertainty relation, delta E into tau is greater than or equal to h cross by 2. So here what we do is we are measuring this from the experimental graph. Okay, and we want to calculate tau. Okay, in the previous type of problem of atomic excited states, I knew tau and I wanted to calculate delta E. Okay, here it is reverse, that's all. So what is the mean life of the compound nucleus? H cross by 2 delta E. Okay, now let me take a particular example. In this particular problem of neutron absorbed by cadmium target, the value of delta E is 0.115 electron volt. Okay, so this is large compared to width of the atomic excited energy states, around 0.1 electron volt. There it was 10 raised to minus 8 electron volt, if you remember. So if you substitute this value, then you can substitute for H cross, and you can substitute here, then H cross will be in joule second, delta E will be in electron volt. You can convert this electron volt into joule. Okay, if you do this calculation, you get tau, the mean life is, in this particular example, it is 2.87 into 10 raised to minus 15 seconds. As I told you, look at the order of the value. So the mean life of compound nucleus is of the order of 10 raised to minus 15 seconds. Okay, from the experimental curve we get the finite width of the energy for which this compound nuclear formation happens. Then using energy time uncertainty relationship, we can calculate the time interval for which this system remains in this state, in this excited state. So actually we are calculating the lifetime of a nuclear excited state. Okay, So this nuclear excited state is called compound nucleus in this case. Okay. Right. Now let us go to a similar situation with still more higher energy in the case of elementary particle reactions. Let's consider. So a third variety of this problem is elementary particle reactions. Okay. This time we want to know what is the mean life of resonance particles. Mean life of resonance particle. So what is a resonance particle? What I have drawn earlier in the case of nuclear reactions, such curves can be drawn in the case of elementary particle reactions. Okay. Consider two elementary particles colliding, we get many other new elementary particles. Okay. So in this process, in this elementary particle reactions, intermediate states, just like in nuclear physics we have intermediate compound nuclear formation. Similarly, we can have intermediate states which can remain there for some longer time and then it decays. Okay. So this type of intermediate excited states are called resonance particles. Okay, the name resonance is derived from the same logic, from the analogy with electrical circuits. You get some peaks in the reaction cross section versus energy curve. That peaks indicate the formation of excited states, or we can call them resonance particles. Now in the case of elementary particle reactions, this the width at half maximum of these peaks can be very high, of the order of mega electron volt. Okay, consider a typical example. Let delta E is some 700 mega electron volt. Okay, so this is actually the rest energy of a particular elementary particle. Consider the rest energy of the elementary particle is of this much order. Then what is the lifetime of this this particle? Let us do the calculation using the uncertainty principle, uncertainty relationship. So what is tau? Tau is greater than or equal to h cross by 2 delta E. You can substitute this one. Then you can convert this into joule. So the answer is 4.7 into 10 raised to minus 25 seconds. The lifetime of the resonance particle is very small, of the order of 10 raised to minus 25 seconds. So in elementary particles, majority of elementary particles discovered, or elementary particles can be broadly classified into leptons and hadrons. Number of leptons are very limited. There are only 6 leptons. Electron is an example of a lepton. Neutrino is another example. Only 6 leptons are there, but there are around 500 and more. Around, maybe now every day the number is increasing. In particle accelerators like CERN, we are discovering new and new elementary particles. So this number is more than 500. So these large number of hadrons, majority of these hadrons, they are hadrons. Okay, all these majority of these hadrons are resonance particles. Okay, so the lifetime of so majority of these resonance particles are unstable. Their mean lifetime is very small, of the order of, it can vary depending upon this their rest energy. It's of the order of, let us say, some 10 raised to minus 18 second to 10 raised to minus 25 second, maybe less. So if this value increases, this value will decrease. Okay. So these resonance particles decay very fast. Their lifetime is very small. They decay very fast by strong interaction, strong nuclear force. So this is the idea of resonance particles. So what we have done is we have applied this energy time uncertainty relationship in 3 different situations: in atomic physics, in nuclear physics, and in elementary particle physics. right? And if we just remember our results, I mean of the order, the order of the different values in atomic cases, okay, the lifetime of the excited state is of the order of 10 raised to minus 8 seconds, and delta E, the width of the atomic energy levels, is of the order of 10 raised to minus 8 electron volt. Okay, this is very easy to remember. Now all the other cases also we can easily remember. You can see in nuclear case, in the case of nuclear energy levels, in many cases the excited states, if it remains there, if the intermediate state is an excited state, but if it remains as an entity for a longer time, we call it as a compound nucleus. Okay, and the lifetime of the what we have done there is we calculated delta E from the experimental graph, okay, and then we calculated the lifetime, right? Delta E was of the order of 10 raised to minus 1 electron volt. I used an example 0.115 like that. So let us say 10 raised to minus 1 electron volt. So you can see that this is actually the width of the excited energy states. So the energy value or the error in energy has increased by a factor 10 raised to 9. No, 10 raised to 7. Okay, 10 raised to minus 8 into 10 raised to 7. So it has increased by 10 raised to 7. We know that there is an inverse relationship between delta E and tau. If delta E increases by 10 raised to 7 factors, 10 raised to 7 order, then tau will decrease by 10 raised to 7 order. So the lifetime of compound nucleus is this divided by 10 raised to 7 or 10 raised to minus 15 seconds. Okay, and thirdly, I applied this in the case of elementary particles. I considered a situation where delta E is of the order of 700 MeV, or we can say of the order of 1000 electron volt, 1000 mega electron volt, right? It's in MeV, 1000 MeV. 700 MeV, I can say that is of the order of 1000 MeV, or let us say, so it is in electron volt, it is how much? 10 raised to 3 into 10 raised to 6, so 10 raised to 9 electron volt. Okay, so from here, from 10 raised to minus 8, how many orders of magnitude to reach 10 raised to plus 9? 10 raised to 17 orders of magnitude. You multiply 10 raised to minus 8 with 10 raised to 17, you get this. Okay, so delta E has increased by 10 raised to 17 orders of magnitude. Then the corresponding tau, the mean lifetime of this resonance particle, it should decrease by 10 raised to 17 orders of magnitude. So 10 raised to minus 8 divided by 10 raised to 17, we get 10 raised to minus 25 seconds. Okay, so we can get a physical idea about these different values. In all these cases, we have used only energy time uncertainty relationship. So if there is if the system remains in an excited state for a finite time interval, there will be the energy measurement will have a finite error, uncertainty, which is this much. Okay, so as we go from atomic energy levels, nuclear energy levels to elementary particle energy levels, the lifetime steadily decreases, and the energy width, okay, or the error in the energy value steadily increases. That's the idea. So this is our first problem, applying energy time uncertainty relation.